webinar. We are really excited about the speakers that are going to present today, and are delighted that you have all joined us today. Before we go into the actual slides about the topic, just a quick introduction of our team. So I'm Maria Brindelmeyer, the person in the top middle. I'm also the YouthLead coordinator. Cassandra Jesse, our director for Youth Power Learning, is on the left. Sarah Sladen, who is also on the webinar today, is our Senior Youth Engagement Advisor for Youth Power Learning 2, YP2LE. And then Rachel Stepka, our Communications Manager, will join several of our webinars. And then here in the room with me are Abhishek, so I'll let him introduce himself with a few words so you get to know his voice.
Hi everyone, good morning. My name is Abhishek, like Maria. I said earlier, I'm also with the YouthLead project. I'm here facilitating and sharing knowledge with the community of young changemakers. To meet you all.
And then Ikenna.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Ikenna. I'm an Atlas Core Fellow, currently with the YouthLead Youth Power Project. Delighted to be here this morning.
Great. And then Nilima, who used to be with us for a year and a half here in Washington, and who is now in Nepal and is joining us from there. So thank you. And we will talk just very briefly about kind of where does YouthLead fit. It's part of a project called Youth Power Learning. And it's a program that focuses on positive youth development, which means that youth should have assets, the ability to leverage those assets, so agency, the ability to contribute to positive change for themselves and their communities, and youth should be surrounded by an enabling environment. So these four components are really important for everything we do with Youth Power Learning, as well as with YouthLead, which is a component of Youth Power Learning. And YouthLead is aiming to be the global hub for young change makers to maximize their impact through networking, mentoring, and accessing information. And obviously, you have all found us, so we're excited. Please contribute to YouthLead, the platform, and make it your platform of choice. And apart from doing the webinars, we also have YouthLead ambassadors. We just selected our second cohort of YouthLead ambassadors, and we'll introduce them to you shortly with webinars and other activities. We also have YouthLead advisors, which is a new concept for us. They are a subgroup of the last round of ambassadors, and will also help with activities and work with the new ambassadors. And we have these topical campaigns which focus on specific topics. The one that we are currently focused on is agriculture and food security, and how youth can get engaged in that. And so that is one of the webinars, and one of the topics and activities under the current webinar that we have is today's webinar. So just as a last component, we have sponsors. Over 20 sponsors have joined YouthLead. They're contributing content, they're contributing webinars, and they are also helping with promoting YouthLead to their youth communities. So we thank them. And with that, let me hand it over to Sarah, who will introduce our speaker.
Good morning, everybody. Can we go to the next slide? All right, good morning. Thank you for joining us. It's great to be with you all. As Maria said, I am Sarah Sladen. I am the Senior Youth Engagement Advisor with YP2LE, and I would like to introduce this morning's speaker, Jane Lowicki-Zucca. She's the Senior Youth Advisor with USAID Bureau for Food Security. Jane serves as the Senior Youth Advisor, and she supports youth inclusion in activities related to agriculture-led growth, nutrition, water, and resilience. Jane served as the Program Director for the Driving Youth-Led New Agribusiness and Microenterprise program in Uganda, facilitating opportunities for youth in agriculture through market systems development approaches that emphasized private sector engagement. Over decades of humanitarian and development work, Jane has held numerous positions where she worked to elevate attention to young people's concerns and support their contributions at all levels. These have included, among others, Director of the Children and Adolescents Program of the Women's Refugee Commission, the International Rescue Committee, IRC, is a senior consultant to UNICEF's Regional Office, CEE-CIS, the Social Affairs Officer within the United Nations Youth Program, and Advisor Youth Protection and Development, IRC. We are really lucky to have Jane with us this morning. And with that, I will turn it over to Jane.
Hello, Jane. Are you there? Jane, can you hear us? Jane, is that you? Can you speak? Like she's speaking.
Oh, you know when she's on the computer now. Yeah, there. She's there.
Hi. Yay. Thank you so much. Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for the warm greeting, and I would like to send you a warm greeting right back. I'm coming to you from Washington, D.C., and this is a very special moment for me. I'm very grateful for this opportunity. The Bureau for Food Security, that's part of USAID, supports YouthLead, and we do so in order to support opportunities for young people to connect with one another, but also in the hopes to find ways to connect with you. So I'm thrilled about this opportunity to connect. And what I'd like to do for the time that we have together is to give you a little bit of an introduction to the Bureau for Food Security. I know that there may be, vastly different experiences among you, so some of this might be already known, but for others it wouldn't be. To put out a little bit of food for thought on youth and agri-food systems for us to discuss later on in some conversation. I've included a list of what I think are some useful resources for you. And also, I put out some questions that I really would like to discuss with you. So we can get in some of that discussion today, but I'm very much open to engaging with you beyond this conversation. So I'm looking forward to hearing your questions as well. I wanted to give you a little bit more information about myself, because I think over the years, I find it's really important just to know a little bit about someone before we get to talking about details. But when I was younger, in my 20s, I started out also working in refugee protection. I was mostly from the New York City area of the US. And over time, I started to work with young people who were becoming advocates for themselves in particularly difficult situations. And I myself was working more on policy advocacy and public information. And I ended up working particularly on children and armed conflict issues, but with an emphasis on adolescents and trying to improve international attention to older kids who weren't getting as much attention. And I've really emphasized the importance of youth participation in that process, and also trying to build evidence for the reasons. And that's pretty tough because youth is not a sector per se. It really cuts across everything, right? And in the last 10 years, I have been living and working in Uganda. So I haven't been in Washington long, just about 9 months now. And as Sarah mentioned, the last thing I was doing there was working on this dynamic program focused on market systems change in youth and agribusiness. I am also thrilled that YPARD participants are here, and I'm very impressed by your work. And I had the privilege of being a MasterCard Foundation mentor with YPARD, with youth working in agriculture. So that's a little bit more about me. I should also say too that as a youth, I was a labor leader. So I think sometimes labor-related issues are something that I have a lot of passion for as well. So I can jump maybe to the next slide. I'm not necessarily seeing, thank you very much. So a little bit on the Bureau for Food Security. It is actually transitioning to become a new bureau, as many different things are changing within USAID overall. And it will be called the Bureau for Resilience in Food Security. But USAID, as probably most of you know, focuses on international development work and assistance on behalf of the American people. And the belief is that in the best of circumstances, foreign assistance really isn't needed. So trying to reach that and partner with people and help people help themselves is, you know, a vision for that is what's being called the journey to self-reliance. So I'm sure many of you may have heard about that. And the areas in which the Bureau for Food Security works are thought then to be essential to supporting work to protect and accelerate progress on this journey to self-reliance. And so some of the areas that are key to this Bureau's activities are inclusive agriculture-led growth, resilience, nutrition, and water security, sanitation, and hygiene programs and policies. You could go to the next one. Thank you very much. Thanks so much. And here's just a list for your reference of some of the key strategies and policies that are mandating and shaping the work of this Bureau. Others do as well, but these are some of the important ones you see here. I just wanted to flag those for you. Thank you. And I also want to underscore that issue of inclusion. And this is central to achieving the Journey to Self-Reliance objectives, as well as the specific objectives of the Bureau for Food Security. So I'd like to read this in particular. Countries in which entire populations are excluded from the benefits of growth, however rapid, cannot be considered self-reliant. So I for sure believe that young people, they must be focused on, or any activities we do related to international development are bound to not be successful. Thank you. So when it comes to youth inclusion more specifically, then here is a list of things I would flag to you that are particularly important within USAID. There is the USAID Youth and Development Policy, and there's an action plan on children and in adversity. And don't forget that many youth are actually technically children by law. And that action plan has been a work that has compiled really important evidence about what it takes to support children in being healthy and along a good development path. And some of those things involve strong beginnings, taking family-centered approaches, and protecting children. And so that does include older children who are on the younger side of the youth category. So for USAID, that category is 10 to 29, but also recognizes and works with definitions that are not just numeric and age-based, but address culture and many other aspects of how people define what youth is. So another very important one for the work of the Bureau for Food Security is the Global Food Security Strategy, and particularly the cross-cutting intermediate result, IR is the intermediate result, number 4, which focuses on youth empowerment and livelihoods. That gives a very strong frame for underscoring what some key rationales are for working with young people, seen as essential within food systems to achieving objectives. And then, of course, Maria also mentioned positive youth development. I won't restate those things. And very importantly, moving into the future, there's an increased increased emphasis on systems approaches. And the emphasis there for me, when we think about youth, I like to very much underscore scale and sustainability amid limited resources, how to support and facilitate the most and as inclusively as possible, youth as possible in a sustainable way. And last but not least, something more recent, the USAID employment framework that lays out some of the beliefs based on existing evidence, and this is especially through the lens of labor economics, some of the evidence on how economies transform and thus where we would understand some of the youth-related issues in that. I have borrowed some, I think, very useful slides from an important resource called the International Fund for Agricultural Development Rural Development Report from 2019. That came out less than a year ago, and I highly recommend to you. It's in the list of resources later. And it lays out, in particular, key issues related to rural young people. So I've borrowed some slides from that work, and especially a presentation by Aslihan Aslan on that. And obviously there's a high concentration of young people in rural areas, and those numbers are growing rapidly. These are some interesting charts here that show, they're called equal area cartograms, that most young people who are youth 15 to 24 are in Asia today. But that will shift where the proportion will decrease, and it will especially grow in Africa. So you could jump to the next one. You can kind of see the shapes and sizes changing there. Keep moving, please. Thank you very much. You can go to the next one. This, I think, also for future reference is a very useful chart. And the main message here is that the majority of countries that have large rural youth populations also have high rural poverty rates. So although in sheer numbers, China and India have most youth, other places where large numbers of young people are tend to have much higher poverty rates. Please move. Thank you very much. I think this chart is also very important to understand, especially when there tends to be a lot of conversation as to whether young people are actually interested in agriculture or not, that young people are very much already engaged in working in agri-food systems around the world, as I'm sure those of you on the phone probably are and know well. So this one gives some really nice data on where some of those placements are. Thank you. And I think this is another one that sends a really key message for us home, which is that, you know, I think how I like to say it is that agriculture holds opportunity for youth, and youth hold opportunity for agriculture. So there's a lot of potential for poverty reduction by making improvements in the agriculture sector, and youth are part of driving that change and can benefit from it. So today, I'm sure with the presentations that come forward and with the discussion we'll have, a lot of how we frame then how we should think about, or what really needs to be thought about when it comes to youth inclusion in agri-food systems, tends to focus on sets of opportunities and constraints. On the left-hand side of this slide, the first 4 bullet points focus in on where there has been a lot of evidence generated to point to key barriers. So access to land is one of those, where young people do not tend to be the ones that own land necessarily, and thus have more difficulty accessing it and using it. There tends to also be, and this is normal also for people starting out in their lives, in their work lives, gaps in capacities and skills in order to uptake opportunities that might be there or create ones for themselves. And then access to finance. Traditional finance systems require things like collateral, which young people do not tend to have. And then gender norms and divides that particularly negatively affect female youth are all key barriers to engaging in an agri-food system for young people. But there are many, many others. Everything from exposure to violence and exploitation. And then when you start to look at specific market systems, they will multiply out. So, you know, access to high quality inputs and services, access to information, very importantly, difficulty making market linkages, attitudes and beliefs on the parts of many market actors among youth themselves. And yes, some are not as much interested in agriculture, while others are, perhaps belief in oneself, or let's say on the side of the private sector, maybe not knowing that young people could be capable or interested. Maybe parents not necessarily believing in the capabilities or even understanding what the possibilities are within various value chains. So attitudes and beliefs are a big one. And I mentioned just a little bit there too about issues of intergenerational relationships and how young people and older people interact and negotiate decision-making regarding engagement in agri-food system related activities. And then laws and policy frameworks. There's certainly legal frameworks that impede or support everybody's, but also specifically younger people's involvement, and much more, ... Thank you so much. So we've mentioned that, you know, youth are integral to development, and very specifically, you know, highlighted agri-food system related activities as part of a contribution to development and the journey to self-reliance. But we know youth are very heterogeneous, right? And we know that one size does not fit all. There might be a double slide here where if you click something in the middle of that Rubik's Cube will come up that says one size doesn't fit all, or press the next slide, I don't know. There you go. We know that, you know, through evidence of positive youth development, that interventions to support youth inclusion are needed at multiple levels: individual, family, community, and systems. They have multiple components. They cut across sectors. So USAID is very aware of this and works to attempt to do more integrated programming, but that is one of our key challenges. And I think, can you go to the next slide also? It speaks to then a frame for, you know, keeping that in mind, thinking through key approaches. Here are a few highlights that have come from some reflection related to BFS's, and that stands for the Bureau for Food Security's work related to youth inclusion in recent years. A key finding is that intentionality matters, that you need to think about working with youth and try to deliberately in order to make some progress, especially where female youth and other youth groups are concerned. So sometimes you may have a youth targeted approach, and sometimes there might be a general approach with a mainstreaming, you know, intentionality. But without truly thinking about it and planning for it, it's very difficult to hit the target of connecting and supporting youth contributions. I mentioned before focusing on scale and sustainability. Again, if we just work with a teeny tiny number of youth, we can certainly make some major impacts with them, and there is a multiplier effect. But looking at the scale of what the challenge are, it's never going to be enough. So we have to keep that in mind. Youth assessments are essential. I will underscore youth-focused market assessments as very essential. Young people need to know, well, what opportunities are we really talking about? What is really viable? Where are these markets going? Everybody needs to understand that in order, and those market assessments need to be done fairly regularly in order to hit some targets that are feasible and to work across sectors and programs to try to make some progress. And also, gender assessments are done too, and can also be more age sensitive and kind of overlapping. Youth and gender issues go hand in hand. We've already mentioned the idea of integrating positive youth development approaches, and also I think a challenge is how do they link and how do we connect them with systems-based approaches? And critically important is involving young people as partners and participants. Also, especially with the journey of self-reliance, engaging with the private sector and employing a demand-driven approaches, focusing on what incentives are needed for youth and those with who interact with them are really critical. USAID really ultimately is facilitating opportunities for all actors in their settings as best as possible. And the private sector is incredibly important for that. So that is a key area of emphasis. And then we have found that we have not been doing a great job at collecting any data related to our work with young people. Increasingly, we will get more age disaggregated data, but we have an important job to do to learn from what we've already attempted. A lot has been going on. You've been involved in many things. So we need to do better at collecting information, analyzing, and adaptively learning from what we've been doing with youth-focused and age disaggregated data. I'm going to list out some resources here, and some links can be attached in, but I know you know about youthpower.org. There's a section of it, though, that's important to find, and I know I've been timing myself here. I have 2 more minutes for my 20 minutes. That is called What Works in Youth and Agriculture Food Security. And there is a collection of some useful information on evidence to date. And of course, you all know about the YouthLead platform at this point, but lots of other young people don't. But that is an important thing that countries can set up, and where I hope that we can find ways to, communicate and connect more and have it be really useful to you. There's agrilinks.org, and that has a youth page that is very useful. There is a 2-volume set that you can get from these links also, that is a design guide for youth-inclusive agriculture and food systems that I would recommend to you. There's also some brief technical guidance that gives a little more information on how USAID has been looking at working with youth as part of the implementation of what's called the GFSS. The Leveraging Economic Opportunity Study, the IFED Rural Development Report. And then I really want to flag this too, because it's an upcoming opportunity on January 21st, which I think might be Tuesday at 12:15 p.m., which I think is Eastern Standard Time. There is going to be a book launch on youth and jobs in rural Africa beyond stylized facts. And so you could go online, the International Food Policy Research Center is hosting that, and participate. And then the next slide. Thank you so much. These are some questions that I'd love to talk with you more about today. And, I'd love to hear more about your experiences of what you think youth-specific opportunities and constraints are to engaging in agri-food systems, how they differ according to various contexts, and also what programmatic approaches that you feel work or don't work, I should have also put in there. Whether you've already been participating in some programs that are funded by USAID that relate to the Bureau for Food Security's areas of work, and whether you feel they've engaged and supported young people, why and why not, and any suggestions you would have for us. And I'm really interested also in how you think a platform like YouthLead could be more helpful to you and other youth who are engaged in agriculture-related issues, and also very interested in what any other questions you might have. So for now, that was my brief piece, and I look forward to the discussion in the next presentations. I'm not sure if there was another slide after this, but I think that might be the last one. Thank you so much. And this is my contact information. I really, very much welcome hearing from you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Jane.
Thank you so much, Jane. I'm going to introduce our next speaker. Abhishek Katka is the country representative from YPARD Nepal. He completed his master's degree in food technology with a major in dairy technology, and he's currently working with Rural Reconstruction Nepal. He's also a country representative for YPARD Nepal and a program officer for YPARD Asia Pacific. Apart from that, he also is utilizing his spare time as a faculty member of dairy technology for Golden Gate College and National College of Food and Science and Technology. He believes that youth should have an entrepreneurial spirit, so he is also the co-founder of Biopolymer Industries Limited, which produces compostable plastics that degrade within 150 days. We're really thrilled to have Abhishek with us today. Abhishek, welcome.
Thank you for the introduction. Hi, everyone. Can I proceed to the first slide? Okay. I'm going to give a brief overview about YPARD Nepal. YPARD is a loose network. It's been hosted by GFAR in the Global Coordination Unit. It's located in Rome, Italy. And YPARD Nepal is being hosted by Nepal Food Scientists and Technologists Association. And in Nepal, it was established in 2012. And we have around 1,258 members. Somewhat the ratio of male-female is around 51-49, somewhat equal number of member. And one of the interesting things about YPARD is, although it's acronym for Youth Professionals for Agriculture Development, but we have members from diverse sectors, just like we even have members from medical science and public health. That's entirely not related to agriculture, but also they are much interested in agriculture background, because Nepal is an agriculture country and they are mostly keen to know about the agriculture food systems. And talking about the YPARD, yes, we have the ground level programs where we can engage youths in the ground level programs. That might be a capacity building, that might be a training, or there might be programs related to success story sharing among the agripreneurs. One of the sad fact of Nepal is most of the people goes out migration for the work and leaving the lands barren, where the productivity of agriculture land is degrading year by year, and we are importing a lot of foods from other countries. So we can try to minimize the gap by building the capacity, by planting some, by giving training to the young agripreneurs. Apart from that, yes, we are also doing some of the advocacy related to youth-friendly practices in agriculture sector. And yes, in 2018, YPARD Nepal was also a partner for Food Conference 2018. And since YPARD is a voluntary network, I'm also giving my time voluntary for this network. This network mostly communicates to all members through electronically. But apart from electronic medias, we do have some of the paper-based medias, brochures or flyers. This is the one of the sample flyers. Actually, in Nepal, most of the people are not educated. They don't understand English. So we developed in the Nepali medium so that it can become very easy for them to understand and to join YPARD. What we found that sons and daughters explain the meanings to their parents through the YPARD messages, just like in blogs or any other post. Can I proceed to next? Thank you. Okay, some of the glimpse of the YPARD engagement. As I said earlier, we have got some ground level programs focusing on youths and agriculture. These are some of the ground level programs focusing on youths and agriculture. The top, so can I go back? Okay, the top right is one of the mentorship program. It was held in one of the rural areas of Nepal. Nepal is in Makwanpur district called Bajrabarahi. And the next one is we have shared this success stories of the agripreneurs, agripreneurs in Chitwan, Rampur College. And then below the right one was we did a training on climate resilient farming to young YPARD members so that they can also learn about the more climate friendly practice, because Nepal is also one of the vulnerable countries for the climate change. And last one is the agripreneurs. Excuse me, can I proceed? Okay, thank you. And last one is the agripreneurs workshop. What we did in this workshop was, since most of the people go out for a migration, what we see the trend is after they return to the Nepal, they are focusing on agriculture. There are lots of examples on this. And the one among this, I'm going to share more thing about the mentorship program. What the mentorship program especially focused in Bajrabarahi, the top right, sorry, the top left, Bajrabarahi area. It's one of the remotest area of Makwanpur district. And what we did, some of the youth went there for around 3 to 4 days, and they stayed with the farmers to talk with the farmers. They planned with the farmers, and they made a plan of the sustainable farming system, the linking the how we can link market and the farmers so that the both can benefit it very good kind in way. There are lots of we also try to show them apps also. I'll be discussing about this later on. Can I proceed to next slide? Okay, now these are some of the members who have contributed who have their own enterprise now. Firfiri Organics, it was established by one of the former YPARD member called Madan Paudel. He is residing nearby Pokhara. And Firfiri Organics is mostly supplying vegetables, flowers, and the farm is located in Tanahu district. Similarly, Best Mad Honey is the one of the wild honey that has been commercially going very high. It's not been around 2 months only, I think it's been in market, but it's going good market in last 2 years, 2 months, because people are very much keen to have wild honey, and wild honey has got more nutrition benefits also, but it should be taken in limit. They are advocating that also. The third one is biopolymer industry. It's my concept. In agriculture sector, what I saw that most of the plastics are used for huge production. Yes, there is a huge production, but are we going to sustainable practice? I don't think so. So I have done lots of research on potato-based starch films and modifying starch films to make a sort of good plastic. Such a good plastic. So, and I recently launched this company around in December only, and we're getting good response from the consumers also. Yes, it's a bit costly, but the cost of environment is also too high. So second last is Team Vermiconics. It's just like it's also made by a group of youths. They are selling the vermicompost in the farmers at really accessible cost, because they are advocating to minimal use of chemical fertilizer and maximum use of the organic fertilizers. And the last is Sun Farmer. Sun Farmer, one of the interesting story that one of the winner who won the storytelling competition had received a seed grant, and he was motivated in agriculture farming. The Sun Farmer is basically, it's a US company, and the US company and his farm partnered, and they are doing a large-scale vegetable farming in Chitlang, Makwanpur district. is so big that it is giving around employment around 40 youths over there, and it's doing great in that area. Can I proceed to the next slide? Okay, thank you. Okay, now I'm gonna share how I got in agriculture sector, because I was in a food technology, food science and technology. I was more focused in processing lines and developing more chemistry, food chemistry areas. But I knew I was also a former member of US Embassy Youth Council in 2013. What US Embassy Youth Council had a typical feature that they had a civic engagement project, and you'd have to develop some ideas which is very new and that brings sustainable system. So there was my friend Sibjan Chomagai who dropped a concept that how can we develop an app on agriculture sector which can teach farmer, which can link between farmer and the consumer and eliminating all the middlemen throughout the value chain actors. So we developed them, and I was just a consultant, but that is the main thing that brought me in agriculture sector. We developed an application around the seed grant that was $6,000 then, and it was very good for the energetic youths like us. I was around 22 years or 23 years then, and we developed an app, and we successfully tried with Google Play Store, and we linked between some of the youths of Sinduli district. And what we done is more than 200,000 application downloads has been done. I've just viewed the Google Play Store. Apart from that, this application is doing so good that it has got many other startup grants also, apart from the seed grants. It's like Easy Mode, Ecoing Green, and it's also working with some of the NGOs and INGOs on climate resilient agriculture. In some of the districts of Nepal, like Nawalparasi, Sinduli, and Dhulikhel. Can you proceed next? Yes, and apart from that, we do have lots of mobile applications which focus on agriculture, ICT-based agriculture. It might be on agriculture extension, it might be on market linkages, it might be on different parameters related to agriculture. But there are many applications in Nepal which are doing really well in agriculture system. It's in ICT sector, because Nepal also back then in 2013 the cost of internet was so high. Now it's relatively getting low, and people engagement in agriculture, ICT based agriculture system is increasing. Can I proceed next? Okay, that was my last slide. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, Abhishek.
Thank you so much. Our next speaker is Asta Busal. She's a member of the YPARD Nepal. Asta completed a master's degree in agriculture, plant pathology, and has 4 years of professional experience in conducting and disseminating results of research to enhance knowledge on agriculture, biodiversity, climate change adaptation, and food security. Asta, thanks for joining us. Please go ahead.
Thank you for the introduction and providing me this opportunity. Hello and welcome everyone. I am going to talk about climate resilient agriculture and engagement of youth in this session. So before I begin, okay, let's move with the first slide, please. Oh yeah. Before I begin, I would like to share about my experience in climate resilient agriculture. I always had a dream to work with the farmers who feed us for our food. So I pursued my master's degree in agriculture with a specialization in plant pathology. My family, my mom and dad were so supportive. They provided me a good opportunity in my entire study period. So after my graduation, I decided to work in the field of climate change, as climate change is taking a good space in today's world. So for that, I joined a national NGO working in the sector of agriculture, climate change, and biodiversity. And while working with the NGO, I was also able to connect with a young professional group network, that is YPARD, which my colleague Abhishek has already shared in detail in earlier presentations. And through YPARD, I got opportunity to disseminate my learnings to new beginners. Next slide, please. So now I want to share about how I initiated my project activities in the field, because we go into field, farmers field, and conduct the activities. So at first, taking the project information in the hand, I went to the field and interacted with the farmers and the members, because a farmers group have 25 to 30 members. So then I explained them about our work and requested to nominate the farmers, because we need to implement the new technology in their field. Then I briefly explained them about our new technologies, like we can see zero tillage with the climate resilient agriculture technology, technology of growing crops without disturbing the soil through tillage. And this technology reduces the labor and saves times of planting the crops. And as we conducted the technology, farmers were able to see the positive results in the field, that is increasing the production with less cost of cultivation. So seeing the results in the field, more farmers were interested to join us for the expansion of this technology in their village. And I was so happy to welcome these enthusiastic farmers in my working period. And it was always a good memory for me working with these farmers and interacting with them and see their good smiles in their face. Next slide, please. So now I would like to share a few promising climate resilient agriculture practices which are being implemented in Nepal. As we can see in the left, the first one, that is crop diversification, which is directly related with agriculture. And as you can see in the picture, various crop has been grown in a small area. And in this practice, one can grow varieties of crops. So even if one crop fails to grow due to climate change or climate hazard, other will replace and increase the food security of an individual household. And the second one in the middle, it is the use of drought tolerant and waterlogging resistant varieties of crops, because the sowing of these varieties will help a farmer to reduce the loss in the production period of the crop. Like drought tolerant varieties require less amount of water as compared to the normal sowing crops, and this will help to overcome the deficiency of the water in certain area. So the farmers where there is less water or they need to depend upon the rainfall, they can use this variety. So talking about the third one, that is a zero-till trail of wheat that has been conducted in the farmer's field. And this is one of the practices where we sow the seeds without tillage. And as I mentioned earlier, this practice reduces the cost of cultivation with the same yield as compared with the traditional one, which farmers have been implementing in their field. And in case of Nepal, farmers used to go to 2 to 3 times of till for sowing wheat. But with this practice, farmers can sow the seeds with 1 till, or we don't have to go for tillage. And this practice increases the soil organic matter, as this soil is less disturbed, and this helps to decrease or escape the terminal heat stress of the crops. So if we are following the rice followed by wheat cropping pattern, then we can immediately go for zero tillage wheat after rice harvest. Next slide, please. So engaging youth is always, yes, this is the one, thank you. And engaging the youth is always a platform for developing their skills. So in this case, as we pursue our theoretical knowledge in universities and college, we can get an opportunity to learn from the farmers and gain much more practical knowledge, which is more practicable in our entire life. And the another thing is, while we pursue our studies, our education in the university, we will be able to disseminate our knowledge, new information to the farmers, or even the juniors of our college and universities. So we can also get involved in advocacy programs of youth rights and participate in some climate actions, and also get their own entrepreneurship in the field of agriculture. So there is a good and supportive environment in case of youths. Next slide, please. However, as we conduct the activities in the field or in any sector, there is always a challenge. So in the entire period of my life, I had faced different challenges. Like in the initial stage of my program implementation, it was difficult for me to get a farmer's attention for my work. Since these farmers don't want to shift to new technologies, it was a big challenge for me to work with them. And like you can see in the picture, I was giving a training to the farmers in far western part of Nepal. They were not listening to me earlier because they were just stick to their practices. But as we get familiar day by day, they were listening to me and they were just getting solutions of different climatic hazards, prevention measures. And another challenges which we young people face in the beginning of our journey is the lack of concentration by the stakeholders, mainly by the stakeholders, is getting a bit concerned before we start our journey in the professional life. But in my case, I just put my ideas in front of the stakeholders so as to overcome the challenges, and then they appreciated for the work and for the words, and they were able to go hand in hand in future. Next slide, please. So I would like to share some of the success stories of engaging youth in agriculture. So as a youth, it was always a good source of inspiration as we go to the farmer's field and share our knowledge, but digging what they are facing and what they are doing since a long time is always an eye-opener for youth like me. Another thing is engaging in different camps and capacity building trainings and sharing the experiences allow us to influence the change makers. And in my case, I was also able to disseminate my learnings in different platforms, in different places, either at the national or international level. And more change makers are interested to listen to me and learn from my experiences now. And yeah, as a youth, slide, okay, yeah. And as a youth, nowadays, people get space to deal with high-level officers. Like in the case of agriculture, we are getting intact with the secretaries of the ministry and even the department heads, where we are able to share our experiences, and even they are appreciating our ideas, and we are able to work together in the project design and project implementation. So let me conclude my presentations by saying like every entity, maybe NGO, INGO, the private sector, or the institutions like farmers group, youth groups, all are equally important for the betterment of the community and overall country. An individual cannot stand alone. So we need to work together for the development of the country. And regarding youths, it is very important to engage them in agriculture, not only by providing the subsidy or inputs they need for the implementation of their program, but we need to provide them the technical know-how of such practices or different technologies which they adopt through capacity building trainings, or we can just go for exposure visits, which they can learn the practical implication of the life, and they can increase their knowledge and skills and can grow efficiently. Thank you very much. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Lima, would you like to go ahead with the question and answer?
Thank you, Abulaji. Thank you for the wonderful presentations. thank you, Jane, for providing an insight into USAID policies, programs, and also sharing and highlighting some of the information on the youth in agriculture across countries. And thank you, Abhishek and Asta, for sharing the importance of mentorship and opportunities and sharing your own stories of how you started your journey into agriculture. We have received a lot of questions from our audience, but since we're running out of the time, perhaps we can ask at least one question to each speakers. So the first question to Jane is how access to land scenario differs in developed countries like USA and developing countries like Nepal and India. Is it same? Jane?
Hi, yes, very good question. Not sure I can answer that one quickly, but, you know, I think different countries have different ways in which land is managed, sometimes traditionally, and other times with a sort of a strong legal framework. So, you know, land arrangements aren't necessarily my area of expertise in terms of being able to describe main differences from the United States to other countries. But I think it's a really important question. I'll find out some more information and put it in to the notes from this meeting. But you know, you're touching on a key issue, which is what are the policy frameworks? How do people organize themselves? What are the traditional and cultural norms regarding how young people can access land? In the United States, there are lots of, there are still family farmers, but there's a lot more commercialized agriculture with larger swaths of land. That isn't always the case in some developing countries, for example. Uganda, I can give an example. There are many smallholders with lots of small plots and less, with some exceptions, notable exceptions, sort of large chunks of land where commercialized agriculture can take place with economies of scale. And I would imagine in very large countries like China and India, there's lots of diversity within those countries as well. So, brief comment that it is a very important question. I can try to get maybe a good summary answer back to you in some notes with some comparisons that might be useful. And it would be interesting to know a little bit more about sort of why you're particularly interested in that question, and then maybe I can zero in on some more detailed sources of information for you.
Thank you, Jane. We have another question from one of our participants from Liberia. In my country, Liberia, most of the youth and farmers haven't realized farming as a business, and they are not willing to venture into agribusiness or farming as a business. How can they know the importance of farming as a business, or how can they get interested in the agriculture sector for empowerment and employment? I think this question can go to Abhishek, since he has been engaged in the network of youth engaged in agriculture. Abhishek, would you like to answer the question? We need to unmute Abhishek.
Okay. Abhishek, you can also unmute yourself.
Okay, thank you. Hi, Joseph. Yes, I'll share one of the case stories typically. In Nepal also, 10 to 15 years ago, their farming was also considered just as a farming. It wasn't considered as a business then. What I experienced that most of the people go abroad and just like Israel, Korea, and some of the Middle East, and they return back to Nepal. First thing, they earn the money, and they are investing money in where they can get a profit. Just like Nepal has a good climate, and they are investing more on vegetable farming, and at least they are getting a huge profits every year, and they are also engaging more people in agriculture. That's the one way the farmers are getting they get earning as employment. And second thing is that in Nepal is a mountainous country also. It has got small fragments of land. In Himalayan region, where the altitude is around 4,000 to 6,000 meter, the farming is not possible. But what we made them realize is, if you cultivate similar crop in a similar manner in a large scale of area, every farmer can harvest around 1 ton potato. So every year in my project site also, a lot of farmers are practicing the same way. We call it as just like smallholder farming in an urbanized manner. And if there is a huge production, the market linkage is very fast to the rural farmers. And just about, I'd like to give the example of land management also. It might be relevant also. In Nepal, we have a law that nobody can keep a land barren. If they keep a land barren, they will be penalized according to law of Nepal. So people are also giving the land into lease and at very low cost. So young farmers can get involved in farming and produce agriculture commodities, so they can link a market also. I hope I address the Joseph's answer.
Thank you, Abhishek. I think the next question directly goes to Asta. As one of the participants is asking, are youth involved in your project, also trained for life skill, including financial literacy? If yes, do you have best practices or lessons learned about how life skills have a good impact on youth development in this project?
So I would like to thank for the questions. So as far as I understand the questions, like there are a lot of opportunities for the youth to be engaged in this project. So the advocacy on financial subsidy through government is much more higher in this context. So we can involve the youth in this context by relating them with the subsidy that is provided by different stakeholders like government. They do have a lot of programs related with youths, and they can get access to the financial services which they have implemented. And another thing is, yes, there are a lot of best practices or lesson learned in case of youth, because in case of Nepal, various young people are going abroad. So in order to attract or lure them back to the country, government has much more supportive programs. And even the young people are involved in entrepreneurship, like even vegetable cultivations, and starting their marketing business. So yes, we do have a lot of experiences and best practices in Nepal.
Thank you, Asta, for highlighting the programs and agriculture policies in Nepal as well, and sharing your experiences about how you're involving the financial literacy. Thank you to all the speakers, and I know that we are running out of the time. Your questions will be shared with the speakers, and we'll also share the recording of the webinars to all the registered participants. And if you're just joining the meeting now through the meeting links, we'll be also uploading the webinar recording on our website. So you can find the webinar recording on the YouthLead platform as well. Thank you for your attention, and over to you, Abulaji.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. This is Ikenna here, standing in for Abalaji. If you have not yet joined YouthLead.org, we encourage you to do so. This will enable you to network with other young change makers and join discussion groups. As a member on YouthLead, you can also post content. You can post resources, blogs, short videos, events, funding opportunities, and you can join discussion groups. You can also post your projects to get more visibility for them. And for every contribution you make, you earn points, and you will earn badges based on these points. Every month, members also get the YouthLead newsletter, which highlights young change makers and the amazing work they're doing all over the world. You can also follow up on social media, Twitter, and Facebook. And above all, reach out to the speakers and continue the discussion about this topic in the YouthLead discussion group. Thank you very much for joining us today. We hope you have a great day, a great afternoon, and a great night's rest.
Thank you very much. Thank you,
Thank
Jane.
you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks to everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Okay, good night from Nepal.
Good night.
All right.